Alright, so have you ever noticed that sometimes when you're challenged, you're absolutely pumped to give it a go, just see how good you can be? Whereas other times, you dread the idea of it and you just actually just kind of seize up when you wanna execute the task. Has anyone ever said, you know, it's all in the mind, or, you know, it's mind over matter? Well, they could have a point. They could have a point. Today, in part 2, we're talking about states of mind. So we're talking about how if you can get in the right state of mind, you can elevate your performance. But if you end up in the wrong state of mind, then it's donezo, you're choking. After that, we'll break down the mentality of those who can perform at the biggest of the big moments, those clutch people. And then, last video, I gave you my 3 most clutch performances of all time. So it's only fair that this time, I'm going to show you the viewer's choice, so what you guys have fed back. So let's go.
Perfect.
Message.
Rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lynx is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody as ruthless. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
Are you saying now, Mike?
Hi everyone, Matt here, bringing you all things sports and exercise with a medical mind and a fan's heart. Welcome to part 2 of The Mind of Winners. Now, if you've made it this far, you already know what clutch means and you also know what choking means. So, in this part, we're going to explore the psychology, so why that might actually happen. And we'll be looking into how your state of mind can lead you down a path to either clutch performance or choking. So, there's loads of ways people have attempted to explain the whole clutch-choke dynamic. And having spoken to a couple of sports psychologists that I work with, the way we're going to approach this is by using something called a theory of challenge and threat states in athletes. Sounds technical, and I will leave some more details down in the description. However, don't worry about the technical aspects, just let me walk you through the journey and I'm sure it will make perfect sense by the end of the video. So as we said, it's called a theory of challenge and threat states. So the key words you need to be aware of are challenge and threat, okay? So what we're getting at basically is that in this explanation, a threat state is a response to a motivated performance situation in which your performance goes down, it's impaired, you choke. Whereas a challenge state is a response in which your body actually improves your potential performance and you perform well. So that's it, simply. But we now need to know, how do we get into those challenge and threat states, and why some people can and some people can't, and why that might vary from situation to situation. How do we end up in a threat state where we perform worse than we should? And how can we get into a challenge state where we can actually potentially elevate our performance? Let me take you through the journey, all right? So let's start from the beginning.
My competitiveness, that sort of brings me through in the clutch. When you have to make a putt, you make a putt. You have to hit the shot, you hit the shot. You just sort of like drop into another zone and you block out everything. Face the competition. I love competition. The pressure, it just kind of pumps me up and I play better.
So, you're an athlete. In fact, you're anyone. And you come across a motivated performance situation. You know, a big game, an exam, a job interview. It doesn't matter what, it's a motivated performance situation where you're under pressure to achieve a goal. What you do, consciously and subconsciously, is evaluate the situation. Assess it. Mentally crunch the numbers and see what the deal is. It seems obvious that would be the case, but how you evaluate the situation is crucial to whether you end up entering a challenge state or going into a threat state and really impairing your performance. And this will ultimately affect how your body really responds to the situation. Now, the way you assess a situation is in two fundamental layers, okay? So firstly, you do what's called a demand appraisal. So you look at a task and just quickly say, what are the demands of this? What do I have to do to complete the task? You then flip it on its head and do what's called a resource appraisal. And that is looking at what resources you have in yourself and externally to complete said task. You then compare your perceived demand to your perceived resources, add it all up, and then you either enter a challenge or a threat state, depending on what you figure out. So, if you feel like you've got enough resources to deal with a demand or deal with it very well, you can enter a challenge state potentially. Whereas if you come to the conclusion that the resources you have to complete the task ain't going to be enough, you're probably going to enter a threat state. Okay, now let's work through your assessment, okay, your assessment of the situation, starting with the demand assessment. This is in 3 layers, okay? So when you're assessing the potential demand of a situation, you're thinking of 3 things. Number 1, your perception of danger. So how much physical, mental, reputational harm can this task cause me? You then address the uncertainty of a situation. So how certain are you about the outcome of this particular situation? You really confident you're going to win or lose or not get injured or not get hurt? And finally, number 3, just the required effort in this situation that you perceive. Do you think this is going to be really hard? You know, just objectively, is it really hard to do this particular thing? As you know, I like teaching via examples, so I want you to listen quickly to a narration of a demand appraisal done by the one and only Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet.
He was too emotional. When I watched him, when he came in the ring, the first time I stepped in the ring, I looked at his face and I saw he was too emotional. I said, no way he's going to win. I was telling my trainer, I said, he's going to lose tonight. Since you made that statement, after the 3rd round, I said, oh God, he's not that bad. He's tough and he could punch and all that, but I know he's never been in there with a fighter like me.
So yeah, I thought it was really interesting to hear his internalized thoughts out loud. So if we quickly just sort of chop that up, his perception of danger, number 1, was very low. He didn't feel like anyone could harm him. Obviously, boxing's a literal translation, so physically harming. He had no thoughts about that. In terms of uncertainty, he was very certain about the outcome. He's certain he was going to knock that guy out. And in terms of required effort that he perceives, low effort. So overall, his demand appraisal and beating said opponent would probably be the demand for that is low. So I hope that makes sense. So with regards to demand appraisals, we've all been there when your mind's thinking about all the potential things that can go wrong and how this is really difficult and you might fail in this aspect. We've all been there. We've all been there. Fortunately, your brain is also concurrently doing something called a resource appraisal, which means it's figuring out all the stuff you have to overcome the obstacles that it's just calculated you have to face. The resource appraisal is arguably key to this whole thing. Do you believe you have what it takes? Simple. And again, that's broken down into 3 segments. Number 1, and I think this is really interesting, self-efficacy. Fundamentally, it's your belief in what you can do with your skills. So in a high-pressure situation, how does your brain come to a conclusion about its own self-efficacy? In loads of ways.
The shot that really matters is a pull-up shot, because it all comes back to that. So doing that shot thousands of times got me so comfortable with the shot that I could shoot that shot anytime. There's nothing you can do about it. And if you shoot a shot thousands of times, I can change the trajectory anytime I want. I can flatten it out anytime I want. You can be in my face, it's not gonna make a difference because it's on autopilot. It's on autopilot. See what I'm saying? So like no matter what happens and transpires here, whether it's a jab step or a crossover or a double, it doesn't matter because when I get to that spot and I raise up and shoot, I've done it thousands of times. That's in the bottom of the barrel. Yeah.
Firstly, your previous performance in a similar situation will massively shape how you see a challenge in front of you. So if you've previously beaten this opponent before loads and loads of times, your belief, your self-efficacy in terms of beating that opposition is going to be very high because you're going to think, oh, I've done it before, I can do it again. There are other ways of building up your self-efficacy which I found interesting. So, vicarious experience for one. So, if you've seen someone similar to you in a similar position succeed, that actually can improve your own self-efficacy. So you can then believe, if they can do it, I can do it. And your belief in that situation goes up. Verbal persuasion is another one. So if someone's gassing you up, you know, maybe yourself or your teammate or your coach, saying, oh, you've got this, you can do it, you can succeed in this situation. That again builds your self-efficacy. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but some high-level athletes swear by visualization. So seeing it before they do it. And that is proven to build your self-efficacy as well.
I practice as if I'm playing a game. So when the moment comes in the game, it's not new to me.
Well, it's called imaginational experience. So if in your mind you've been in this position hundreds and hundreds of times, when you're actually in that position, you've got a belief that you can overcome the demand put in front of you. So self-efficacy is really important. And I would say number 2 is a brother of self-efficacy. That is control, particularly perceived control over a situation. It's not enough for an athlete or an individual just to believe in their own ability. They also need to have belief that they've got control over that situation. They've got control to be able to express those high-level skills that they believe they have. In sport, as we know, there are so many factors that can affect the outcome of a competition. Your teammates and your opposition for one. The weather, the season of the year, your own physical condition. A clutch athlete will be able to block all of that out. So the fact that it's an away game, that they're in pain, that it's raining, none of that will matter to a clutch athlete because they'll be able to focus on the aspects of performance that they can control and ultimately improve their performance by focusing on that. On the other hand, if an athlete thinks the situation's out of their control, that they're not ultimately in charge of the outcome of that situation, they're putting themselves in a position to choke. Now, the third part of our resource assessment, I love talking about. And I love talking about it because I believe it's the fine line between good and great. And I think it's something some people don't quite get and something that you will get by the end of the video, right? What I'm talking about is goal orientation. Ultimately, what are your goals in this individual situation? Are you hoping not to lose or are you aiming to win? When you're through on goal, are you praying you don't miss and embarrass yourself? Or are you looking forward to that feeling when you score and can celebrate? What we're splitting goals into are approach goals and avoidance goals. Now, an approach goal reflects a motivation to be seen as more competent than either your previous performances or the competition ahead of you. An avoidance goal, however, is avoiding incompetence. So you just don't want to be seen as worse than, your previous performance or worse than the competition around you and in front of you. Listen to Kobe Bryant, one of the clutchest players of all time, when he's talking about pressure situations and failure, his mentality, his view towards it.
I take you to this scene. 20 seconds left to go. You're down by 1. You want the ball. You want to take the last shot.
Absolutely. I'm not afraid to fail, and I just love it. It's just an adrenaline rush. Everybody in the crowd stands up, and everybody's waiting to see if you're going to make the shot, if you're going to lose the game, or you're going to win the game. It's an unbelievable rush.
Now, from that clip, you can see that he's got no interest in avoiding incompetence. It doesn't matter to him. What matters is the quest for competence. And that's probably why he was able to be so clutch and perform in those situations when others would be scared and enter a threat state. He can elevate into a challenge state. So, an athlete who has approach goals, so who's focused on showing competence, they're more likely to view a challenging situation, so a motivated performance situation, as a chance to prove themselves. And as a result of that, they're more likely to enter a challenge state and elevate their performance.
I wanted people to know the difference between me and Clyde. It was always a comparison.
Yes.
And I didn't want it to be a comparison. I wanted it to be totally different. I wanted people to see that on the highest stage.
Conversely, Someone who's focusing on avoiding incompetence will see a motivated performance situation as a threat and potentially enter a threat state and choke. So let's break this down bit by bit by bit. An athlete enters a motivated performance situation and makes a demand assessment as well as an assessment of all the resources they perceive they have to succeed in that task. Based on that assessment, if they think they've got the resources to take on that task, they feel good and can enter what's called a challenge state. Whereas if they do the calculations and their resources don't match up to the demand of the situation, they then enter a threat state. A challenge state is linked with increased performance, whereas that threat state is linked with choking or reduced performance. How do you get into a challenge state? So, an athlete will experience a challenge state if they have, number one, high self-efficacy, so high belief in their ability. 2, high control or high perception of control. So a high belief that they can really affect the outcome of that situation. And thirdly, they have a focus on approach goals. So a focus on showing competence, on winning rather than avoiding losing.
Was fear of failure a motivator? I never feared about my skills, because I put in the work. Work ethic eliminates fear.
Yes.
So if you put forth the work, then what are you fearing? You know what you're capable of doing, what you're not.
So this explains MJ, for me. This explains MJ. Let's go through it. Number one, he had extremely high self-efficacy. He believed he was the best in the world. He believed he was the best on the court. And that stemmed from previous experience and just the fact that he was, okay? Number two, he had extremely high perceptions of control. So he believed he can affect the outcome of that game and will his team to a win, regardless of any other external factors, regardless of injury, regardless of opposition. And thirdly, we know this already, he was focused on approach goals. He was focused on showing competency, showing how good he was, focused on winning, never ever focused on avoiding losing. And that's a key distinction. You need all three to enter a challenge state, and he had them in abundance. So in those pressure situations, I'm sure he was able to enter that challenge state and elevate his performance. It's important to remember that this evaluation process is occurring both before and during competition and evolving moment by moment and situation by situation. As a result of this, your perceptions of demand and the resources available to tackle that demand will change throughout the situation. Therefore, your state can evolve from challenge state to threat state, depending on the situation. So that's part two, a theory of challenge and threat states in athletes. What have we learned? Number one, in every motivated performance situation, you make a conscious and subconscious evaluation of the demand required of that situation, closely followed by an evaluation of the resources you feel you have to meet that challenge. If you determine that you have the resources necessary to meet and exceed the demands of that challenge, you can enter a challenge state. If, on the other hand, you do the maths and don't think you have the resources available within yourself to meet the demands of that situation, you can enter a threat state. Threat states are linked with choking, whereas clutch performance is linked with the ability to change into a challenge state and improve your performance. So, there are still a few questions left to be answered. When you enter a challenge state, what happens to your emotions and what are the physical processes that happen within the body that actually elevate your performance? Vice versa, what are the answers for when you're in a threat state? What happens to your emotions and what happens inside your body? Those are the questions I'm going to answer in the next video. So make sure you subscribe so you get the notifications, and follow me on Instagram @DocInTheArena so you can keep up to date what's going on. Other than that, I got the viewer's choice of the 3 most clutch moments coming up, and I'll see you soon.
Three in the box waiting for the cross, and it was Bale. Oh, what about that? What about that from Gareth Bale? Gareth Bale. Oh, it's an absolute Beaut. Oh, look at the height he's got off the floor to hit that ball. It's behind him.
Three right away. Just attack the basket. James catches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining. Chris Bosch with the huge offensive rebound. And now instant.
Smashing through it, but it's going to be hard otherwise.
It's Ronaldo. Oh, he's done it! He has only gone and done it! Cristiano Ronaldo! Sensational free kick! A brilliant hat-trick! A magnificent game! Portugal 3, Spain 3, Cristiano Ronaldo scores the 51st